Oh, hi. It's been a while. It's been quite a while. But, as promised, I said that even though I was putting the show on hiatus, when and if they went and put out the final quarterly development blog for the year, I would be back to go through and record a little in between episode, of the podcast to go through and put out while we wait for episode 200 coming in January. So yesterday, the December 15th, we got the Q4 D4 dev blog. So here I am, gonna go through and record this episode. We're calling it episode 199.5. Just to go through it, keep tracking. It's half episode, and also we want this would be special for an episode 200, but we wanted that to be little something. So we'll still save that one a little bit out, but to the meat and potatoes of things, we got our final developer update for the year for Diablo IV, and this one, of course, was a culmination of a lot of things that they've been talking about since BlizzCon of last year. Is a lot of really good stuff. I've been probably too positive on a lot of the changes that they've gone with the previous development blogs, and this one is really like no real change on that at all. Because I'm seeing everything, the culmination of them going through and listening to feedback and such. Maybe some feedback that I don't overly agree with, but it's something that if enough people are going through and asking for it and saying it, then, well, those people know what they want more, and, you're not going to please everybody with the game, and I'm willing to concede that if it's something that I don't agree with, but more people find it fun, then hell, do it. Do what makes people happy. I'll find other things in the game that I'll enjoy if I don't like that one aspect. But obviously this is being recorded December 16th, so it's a day after the blog went live. This isn't my knee-jerk reaction. I've been able to read through the development blog a couple of times, just as I've done in the previous feedback videos that I've given. The one difference is on this one is I've not had the chance to go through and listen to other people's feedback before giving my own. Things have just been really busy and hectic with my schedule lately, and so one of the things I did like doing is going through and listening to other people discuss their thoughts and feelings on these development notes and the changes and such, and see how some of my opinions might differ from theirs. Did they notice something that I didn't? And this time I unfortunately didn't really have the opportunity to do that. So maybe not as complete and thorough of feedback as I would like, compared to some of my previous videos. We'll still move on and push through in order to go and at least get this out there. So we've got the development blog, and one of the kind of it starts off as what seems fluff, but it actually is, to me, something that's really big, something that's kind of really telling, and that they start off with kind of where they're at in the progress for the game. And let me go through, just pull up the browser scene here real quick. And so it's just some of the things that they're going through and talking about, where they say that they understand how important it is to get itemization right, and that they're paying special attention to early player feedback on that part of the game. And that they knew that many more iterations awaited between what we showed you at BlizzCon 2019, our follow-up blogs, and the final game release. We also knew from past Diablo entries that we will need to have time and resources to make these iterations. Thankfully, we have baked that into our current schedule. Now, that one just kind of seems as kind of just a little minor comment, but I think that one is pretty big and pretty telling. That that they are in this for the long run. They are not scared to go through and say that the game is still quite a ways out there, and that they realize that it's going to take them a while in order to find the sweet spot. Maybe not the perfect answer, but as good of an answer that they can get in terms of in-game systems, gameplay, and all those other things. And they're not being rushed. Look at Diablo 3. That was 4 years from announcement to release, and every BlizzCon the game radically changed, from skill runes to no skill runes, and a talisman with charms, and then no talisman, and then they axe the enchantress. Then they later put her back in and reap her soul. So there was a lot of big sweeping changes that they went through and made to the game, and they're looking at that development time and resources that they put into it, and realize that it's going to take a while. And we can even see that just now from when the game was announced last year to today, as we read through this blog, that they've changed some of the things that they've said in other blogs already. And so there's a lot of iterations, and they're not afraid to go through and go back on their previous development ideas to make radical changes to the system if it's going to give a better gameplay overall. And to that, I'm excited. This is like the answer that you want to hear. We always hear from Blizzard that it's done when it's done. It's done when it's ready. That's when we'll release the game, when it's ready. And this is just further commitment to that fact that they are going to be holding on to it, and that they do have long-term goals. They don't have any predispositions that, oh yeah, we could pump this out 2 years after announcement or something like that. So it does unfortunately have the side effect that it makes it seem as if it still is quite a ways away, maybe 2022. It just seems so far away. But they do have some little interesting tidbits there that, this is the last quarterly blog for the year. And we won't be getting a quarterly blog in quarter one of next year because BlizzConline will be going through and filling that position. So in lieu of one of these little development blogs, we'll be getting a bigger announcement and update that would probably be something more akin to what we would expect from a BlizzCon, which is these multiple hour-long panels, like community feedback sessions and stuff like that. So I'm hoping that we're going to have some big in-depth video or presentations that they go and show us a little bit more about some of these nitty-gritty game details. I would love to see how some of the art is going and coming along for the game, because going back to the last development blog and that skill tree, or even just the art that we have here, that is beautiful. That is amazing. I love everything that I've been seeing from the art team over here on Diablo 4, and I'm really looking forward to it. But the big one, you probably have heard this one already, is just say, we've read speculation about what it could be and want to ensure you that it's something chunky indeed. This is in regards to what the announcement or the update is going to be at BlizzConline. Without spoiling the surprise, let's just say that it involves a new version of the campfire scene that we showed you at last BlizzCon. And so we have the campfire scene of Diablo 4 from last BlizzCon, where you have the characters all sitting around this campfire getting ready to go out on an adventure in the dark and gloominess. And if you've not played Diablo 2, you might wonder what's the significance of that. Well, that's because where is the image? There we go. The campfire is iconic to Diablo 2 as being your character select screen. So if they're going to be making updates to the campfire screen, that tells me new class announcement. And something else that would also be a little bit of a tell on the previous topic about timing of the game. Are we going to get just one class announced? Or are we going to get both of the remaining classes announced for Diablo 4? If they end up announcing both classes and we get the whole lineup of all 5, I might revisit my estimations of when the game might go and come out. Because that was one of the things with Diablo 3. They held it out for quite a few years. They showed just the Barbarian and the Witch Doctor. Then you got the Wizard. Then you got the Monk. Then you got the Demon Hunter. It took a while for them. It literally took years for them to go through and put out all the remaining classes there. So if we get just one class announced next year at the BlizzConline, it definitely is looking like that might be the full game will be some ways away, because they've still got like a whole another BlizzCon before they announce the final class, you know. But if they announce both of the classes, then it's sooner than we expected. But that's definitely, you know, it's already going through and starting off with just these little tantalizing tidbits that I'm already going through and loving and enjoying. But yeah, let's get back into some of the actual nitty gritty of the update itself. So they do talk about some of the things that they are going through and focusing in and deciding when it comes to changes to the game and some of the core ideals, you know, for Diablo 4. You know, first they want to make sure that they want to strengthen class identity by providing intuitive fantasy hooks. Items and skills that lean into the fantasy of your class are best. Big agree. You know, that was something that I think worked out really well in Diablo 3, where they go through and they doubled down on the classes and just what those classes meant and the skills and the play style. So that way you had a lot of class identity. That is obviously something that they should continue to do. Make all the classes different. Make them feel powerful in their own rights. Build upon that class fantasy, so that way it feels different playing a wizard from, say, a necromancer. You know, that's something that, you know, Diablo 2 got a little bit away from, with like the rune words and things like that, where you're able to go through and play like basically different class skills. You know, what was it, like a Fury Amazon that could whirlwind, you know, things of that nature. The second core ideal is that they wanted to strengthen deeper customization through our itemization. Items should support and enhance your class, not define it. This is something that I've talked about on many episodes prior, that yes, that is going to be the proper way to go through and do items. It's something that Diablo 3 got away from in going through, and just how the game itself ended up playing out, is that items defined your class. Your class didn't define your class. Your skill selection and how your class played was entirely dependent upon the items that you had drop. If you're early in a season, you might not have the proper items drop. You don't get to play that build. You don't get to play the way that you like to play that class. And so if they're taking that power and those choices away from itemization, putting them into direct player choices, direct player control, that's far better. Like in Diablo 2, you could play a Poison Necromancer if you wanted to play a Poison Necromancer. Your skill selection is what went through and made that happen. The items that you got just made that build work better. You could still go through and do it. You could still play Hell without, you know, Trangle's Claws, without Death's Web, because you had access to your poison that you could ramp up the damage on. If you ran into a poison elite, you had lower resist, so that way you could still go through and do damage to them. Rainbow facets and other things like that help increase your skill damage and lower their resistances to make the build even better, but they weren't what defined it. As opposed to if you wanted to go through and play Necromancer nowadays, you know, you would be basing it around either a couple of core items, such as like a Corpse Whisper, or you know, the gauntlets, Essence Grasp, so that way you had like a Legacy of Dreams Corpse Explosion, or you're playing the new you know, the Mask of the Burning Carnival, where you're all Bone Spear. There was the items that were making those choices for you, not yourself. It definitely was putting a lot of those choices out of the player hands. Putting it back into the player's hand and giving them control about that is definitely a step in the right direction. It makes you feel better. You have more of a connection with your character, because it's the little buttons that you're going and pressing, you know, every time that you level up or you find this really cool, unique, like, skill book or something like that, that are defining your class, not the little drops. And then finally, they said that they're landing on overall depth somewhere in between Diablo 2 and Diablo 3. Which is good. You know, that's something that's a little bit more in depth than Diablo 3 is awesome. You know, especially when you're going through and putting the power back in the player choices. So you are going to have the opportunity to make mistakes, screw up your build, but that's fine. It's a learning experience. There'll be ways and steps that new players or casual players or people that don't understand or playing a new class that they don't know how it works, they'll have ways of figuring it out, whether through trial and error or through tribal knowledge and outside resources and stuff. That they'll have that opportunity. Maybe Diablo 2, in my opinion, was definitely a little bit too complicated at times, especially when you're going through and trying to calculate things like faster cast rate, faster hit recovery, or increased attack speed. Those were things that had very set breakpoints, and so the items were useless unless you hit certain things. So if you got 10% faster cast rate, all of a sudden, I can see I'm casting spells faster, but then you get 20%, 30% faster cast rate, and it's not making a difference. You're not casting any faster. You didn't hit a break point to cut more frames off of the skill animation. And that's something that not even Diablo 3 did perfectly, because, Diablo 3 had more breakpoints to make it feel more linear, but it wasn't actually a truly linear system. There were breakpoints, and that was something that if you go and you look at like high level play with Diablo 3, there's certain attack speed breakpoints that you have to hit in order to maximize either procs or the number of corpse lances per second that you're going through and throwing out, things of that nature, which becomes a bit esoteric in order to try and find that information. If they make that even simpler than Diablo 3 system, and I have no idea if Diablo's 4 game engine is capable of handling that, or if it's even something that's obtainable in game engines in general, if you will have forever increasing linear attack speed versus actually having to like hard code breakpoints into like increased attack speed. I don't know. Not a programmer, not a developer, way outside of my pay grade. But if they were able to make that easier to understand, and just equipping more attack speed actually just always gives you more attack speed, like that is making the game simpler and easier to understand. Like that's a level of depth that the game doesn't need. Diablo 2 was all about hitting certain breakpoints for certain skills because it just was so rough around the edges. It was very jaggy and clunky with the game engine, even at the time, compared to other things, because that was just, all that the developers had tools with which to do. And so it created this complexity, this depth of understanding that you had to master in order to play the game efficiently. But it didn't really add anything to the overall game, knowing that, well, once I hit, 30% faster recovery, that my next break point is 50% faster recovery, and so I need to get all of faster hit recovery off of all of my gear. I don't need any more until I could hit that 50, just like I don't need faster hit recovery because I'm not using a shield. The stat's completely useless to me. So those are definitely like examples or points of where you could limit the depth, you could limit the complexity, but not actually remove anything from the game. So just because they're going to be going through and not being, as complex as Diablo 2 system is, doesn't mean that it's going to be a lesser game. There's still a lot of things. This is something that talked a lot about on a previous episode of the Danctuary podcast, where, complexity to me isn't as important as weight of decisions. And so as long as you're making meaningful, impactful decisions, that's what should matter more than the actual complexity of the system itself. If I can get a better overall gameplay or game experience by pressing one button instead of pressing 5 buttons, then, that's good. Imagine if opening and going and assigning your Paragon points required you to go through 5 different screens before you got to the Paragon screen to then click on another tab to then put in your points. That's more depth, it's more complexity, but it isn't good, just as an example. And then we start getting into the skill trees. They go and they talk about that they're taking a lot of the feedback that people have given, so they're going to maybe condense some of those skill choices and some of the patterns of those skill choices, so that way you can focus more on an individual aspect of the tree as opposed to having to go through and spread out. Whereas if in the previous dev blog we saw that if you wanted to go through and say do a charge bolt build, there are skill nodes to upgrade charge bolt further down the branch from charge bolt, but then also there were other ones back behind other skills, and you might have to put some points into like an ice skill to then get another charge bolt upgrade node. And so they listen to some of the feedback and they're condensing those choices down. So it will help to reinforce that if I really want to play a charge bolt sorceress, I feel like I'm putting my points in becoming further down the line of being a charge bolt sorceress instead of putting points into blizzard or something like that, that I don't want to do or don't want to use. I think that it could be fine. It would be okay if you did have some upgrade nodes past other skills that required you to branch out a little bit. But you had to make those upgrades or powers more enticing, and that point that you put into Blizzard or whatever isn't just a wasted point that you're putting in there just to get to another thing. But say you've got something that upgrades Charge Bolt past Blizzard. But it allows it so that way whenever Blizzard deals damage, it has a chance at like shooting down lightning. Things like that make sense and make me want to include Blizzard into my Charge Bolt build. Is not a bad way of doing it. But that is something that the readability and such becomes an issue. So I can see if they want to go through and just kind of like condense everything down, so that way it makes more sense as more of a path progression than kind of like just a free range, go wherever you feel like. And then the other one is something that anyone that's been listening to the show for a long time I think this is going back all the way to the very early episodes of the podcast many years ago. The ability to respec, where Diablo 3 just took it way too far, and one of the things I think that D3 missed out on compared to Diablo 2 is the fact that, well, I'm playing a Necromancer as opposed to, well, I'm playing a Laggy Mancer, I'm playing a Fishy Mancer, I'm playing a Poison Mancer, I'm playing a Bone Mancer. That it was just like when you hear people go through and talk about, oh yeah, I'm playing a Necro this season, and then I'm going to try out this set. So it's like that form of class identity, that resonance that you have with that class, that kind of like connection that you have with the character that you're playing, was dropped in favor of having a more simpler, approachable system in Diablo 3 as opposed to Diablo 2. And they're going and talking about that they don't want to punish people for going through and maybe making a mistake and then having to like reroll a character or something like that. So they want people to be able to go through and change their mind, back out of skills, respec your actual class and such. But it will be gradually more expensive. So it'll be something that will be easy to do in the beginning of the game, but as you approach in-game, it's going to have a significant investment. They don't say what, maybe time, resources, both, something like that. But they want it to appropriately match the time and effort that you put into defining your character. That is perfect. Make the R in ARPG matter a little bit again. Let's get some of the role-playing back into the action role-playing game. Great. Having that connection, that permanency in your character while still having the ability to change in case you mess up. What more can I ask for at that point? Then one of the other big things, probably one of the biggest things in this dev blog, is primary stats. So before, literally like a year ago, they went through and they talked about how they were going to be introducing angelic, demonic, and ancestral powers to the game as kind of their solution to main stats, primary stats that existed in D2 or Path of Exile, Grim Dawn, and pretty much every other single ARPG in the genre. They are going to be dropping those things, and even though they liked the imagery conjured by those phrases, it didn't reinforce the fantasy of what playing the classes was all about. And this is one of the things that was my biggest criticism of the system, is that there's a readability issue there. And the easiest way to go through and like say that is like when you go and you have the main stat, it makes it easy. There's just so much indoctrination, not just in ARPGs, but RPGs across the board, that you are predisposed to knowing what those things are. A new player that knows nothing about the game goes and starts playing around with it. When they gain a level with a barbarian, they're going to put their points in strength. Versus that same person gains a level and a sorceress is going to put their points in intelligence. They just know that those stats are for those classes. It's just part of this innate knowledge that we have acquired over time, because we've seen these archetypes, we've seen these tropes again and again and again. And so that versus, well, I'm playing a druid. Should I put points into demonic or angelic? Who knows? And that's the easiest way of doing it. Is, you know, even though they can both these systems can fulfill the same role, you know, it's definitely going a route that's going to make it easier for the casual player. And if you can do something by just changing the name of the skills or the stat points, and then all of a sudden it makes more sense, then, you know, you kind of have to realize that there is a little bit of an issue going on there with the readability. But, you know, it's nice to go through, see it return. As we can see, like in the little GIF there, whenever you go through and level, you get 5 stat points, 2 skill points that you can go and spend any way that you see fit. And now we have, instead of the angelic, demonic, and ancestral, we've got strength, intelligence, dexterity, and willpower. And they all have slightly different abilities, and those abilities actually will change based on what your class is. So we can see here on the barbarian that strength increases skill damage in addition to their defense, intelligence increases their all resistance, willpower increases resource regeneration and their healing received, dexterity increases their critical strike chance and their dodge chance. But on the sorceress, unfortunately, you know, my lovely face is going through and blocking out that image there. See if I can get a little bit better in frame. Strength no longer increases skill damage, it just increases dexterity. But intelligence now increases skill damage in addition to the resistance. But now it's willpower that increases their critical strike chance instead of dexterity, and it's dexterity that increases their resource generation instead of willpower. So the different stats will mean different things for the different classes, and that is cool. That makes that fulfills that first goal of going and building upon class fantasy and class identity, to where different stats mean different things to different characters. It adds a little bit more depth than Diablo 3 system, where it's just damage, defense, and HP, which I will point out here, vitality is not an option. Thank goodness. You know, you actually have to go through and, you know, build out points in other systems and things like that, because let's all face it, vitality is just boring. Really doesn't do anything. You rarely ever see the full benefit of all those points in vitality that you see. You know, you never have enough when you die, and if you have a sufficient amount to keep you from dying, you know, it doesn't, you know, the amount that you had doesn't really matter. You know, it's very few instances where you just live, you know, by the skin of your teeth that allow you to go through and be like, oh man, thank goodness I've got 50 million points in vitality. It's just boring stat. You know, so I'm glad that each of those skill points that we go through and put in there are going to have some form of impact on our character. Some more so than others, depending upon the class that you play. And, you know, this also is going to be going and tying into one of the other changes that they've made to the skill trees. And so one of the big things that angelic, demonic, and ancestral power system was going to fulfill is that you had to meet certain power requirements to activate affixes on your items. So it was something that you had a little bit control over. You know, the only thing that we had really seen, we hadn't seen the full system fleshed out, but the only thing that we had seen is that you can choose which items to equip that have the different stats that will then activate attributes or affixes on other pieces of gear. So it's still one of those things that you have some choice there, but you're still getting that power from gear. Now, they're still keeping that same nature, and so you're getting bonuses derived from having certain levels of primary stats, but they're tied into the skill tree. And that you'll be able to go through and pick skills in the skill tree. In this particular image that you have up, you have Whirlwind. And then you have the upgrade nodes that you can pick later on in the skill tree. In some of those that you can see with that second Whirlwind upgrade, is that when you go through and you pick it, you do have an immediate benefit. Whirlwind will no longer slow the barbarian's movement speed while active, so that way you don't have to worry about it going and slowing you. But if you have 150 points in dexterity, the Whirlwind will also provide a scaling movement buff the longer you channel it. And so that is cool because now I have a reason as a barbarian to stack something besides straight strength. I can get a benefit by stacking dexterity and unlocking that particular node on the skill tree. That's good. That's awesome. I want to see more of it. I want to see a barbarian power that requires me to put points in intelligence. I want to see what that skill system looks like. I want a reason to want to go through and put points into willpower, put points into intelligence on a barbarian. Well, what is it that's going to benefit me in those skill upgrades in order to do that, in order to make those changes, to the characters and such. And so it's nice that they're going through and taking that again, taking it off of items and putting it into direct player decisions. Now, we don't know if 150 dexterity is something that's reachable, in 40 levels, 50 levels, with what you go through and gain, or maybe there's going to be story bonuses and such. Obviously, items are still going to play a little bit of a factor in here because you're going to have to equip items with main stats on it to try and hit some of those higher numbers, but it's still something that's being driven by your individual choices. Every time that you level, I'm working towards a goal and making my character more powerful by unlocking things without having to worry about items. Items will help me attain those goals faster. Maybe at the very higher echelons, at the very end of the skill system progression, yeah, you've also got to dedicate all of your items to strength and dexterity as well in order to get those. And that's something that, people that remember Diablo 2 is something that would happen. You would put just enough points into strength and dexterity to get your items equipped that you needed, in order to perfect your build or maximize your defense or, whatever it was that you were trying to do. And then everything else into vitality. But I'm really liking these changes. They're keeping the same flavor of what those systems were supposed to handle, but putting them more so in player choices than item choices. Common theme, absolutely love it. The one thing, kind of going through and jumping ahead, that is kind of missing out a little bit though, in all of the items that we've seen so far, nowhere do I see any of them that have a stat requirement in order to equip the item. And the whole premise of having those ancestral powers unlocking affixes was coming from a point of view that people wanted to have wanted to make those stat choices matter, in that you can't equip certain pieces of gear without having them. In previous episodes, I thought that they needed to go further than what they had shown previously, because I might not care that I have enough demonic power to give me 4% critical strike chance when I'm equipping the item for the innate legendary bonus that's on it. And now, it seems like I can just equip the items without having any stat allocations at all. They don't mention anything in the blog as to whether that is gone entirely or if it's something that they're still working on. But I would like to see that if they are going to go this route, to make those stat point allocations matter just a little bit more, is to lock certain items behind certain stat requirements. It's something that might, at first, when I was back at BlizzCon 2019 talking with a lot of my friends that played a lot of Path of Exile, and they were going through and trying to convince me about why needing stat allocations on items was a cool and interesting choice, because it led you down certain, progression paths in the sphere grid and other things like that, that I'm going to maybe unoptimize my character a little bit to go heavy into willpower so I can equip this one particular item that really helps my build in the long run. that I've now come around to like that way of thinking, and I can see the merit in it. But I also see it as a point of view of that it's a learning tool, it's a teaching tool. If you go through and you have an item with a really cool effect, but requires a stat that you haven't been putting any points into, it's a teaching moment for the person that maybe I need to value these other stats more than just dumping it straight into strength every time because I'm playing a barbarian. I'm going to go through and I'm going to find some sort of really cool belt that triples the amount of fury that I generate whenever I go through and use a generator, so that way I get to press my big buttons more often, but I need to have a lot more points and willpower in order to use that item. Gosh, I should have been putting points into willpower. That's how it works. I just had a eureka and aha moment. And so that's what I think is like kind of like one of those positive, like, you know, meanings of having, you know, stat requirements for items. You can use that as a teaching tool to players that, hey, you want to put things in more than just strength when you're playing a barbarian. You want to put things in more than just intelligence when you're playing a sorceress. So that's you know, that's my little take. That's my little feedback on it. Going through and pushing, you know, kind of like the flavor of the power system into the skill system and player choice, great. But let's not forget the entire reason that it was created in the first place was to help manage item choices as well. We can still have both of those where power is in player choice, but those stat allocations still matter for what items that we equip and how our builds work out. Those are still very valid points that we should probably still continue to look at. But going into the items themselves, going outside of those stat changes and such, they're going to make weapon types matter. And so one of the ways that they're going through and doing that is something that we hadn't seen before, is all weapons just had like an attack value, but they didn't have an attack speed. Well, now they do. They're going and they're dividing weapons up into different types of attack categories. You have slow, fast, very fast. Now this is different from the way that Diablo 3 did it, where it just actually showed you the attack speed of the items. But this is very reminiscent about how Diablo 2 did it, where the attack speed, the value of it wasn't actually listed on the item. It just told you what the attack speed was. You know, fast, slow, or whatever. And then there was a bunch of really esoteric, you know, formulas and stuff like that you had to go through and figure out in order to get the actual attack speed of the weapons. How much increased attack speed did you need to hit breakpoints combined with modifiers from skills and blah 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 blah, and we start getting super complicated. So while I do like the system, it gives you choice, it gives you diversification, so it makes you feel a little bit better about those choices that you make. I would like that the actual hard-coded values of those weapons is accessible in some way or shape. So if you have just the default icon just says, you know, like this wand is a very fast item, but I can go and click something that will tell me it's 1.6 attacks per second, you know, we're gonna figure that information out one way or another. SVR will do it. That man will do it. He'll find a way. And then it's going straight into Wolfram Alpha. But, you know, so just having that information available and not going the way that Diablo 3 took, whereas they erred on the side of approachability by making simplified tooltips. Give us a way to expand those tooltips. Give us a way to make sure that we're seeing the full nitty-gritty details and mechanics behind those, because, well, we're going to figure it out anyways, and I'd rather not have to tab out of the game to go through and remind me, oh, what was the actual attack speed of that particular wand, without just being able to see it right there in the game itself. Less of a reason to tab out of the game, better. The other thing that this goes through and brings up, that maybe not necessarily having that actual attack speed value there and instead just saying like fast, very fast, or slow, is again the way that Diablo 2 did it. And one of the biggest things for that I will always remember is like two-handed maces, big two-handed weapons. Their attack speed was different depending upon the class that you played. If you're playing an Amazon or an assassin, the attack speed on those big two-handed maces was slow. Like this Ogre Maul, this Elite Ogre Maul, like Amazons, Assassins, Barbarians, and Paladins, it was a slow attack weapon. For Necromancers and Sorceresses, it was actually a normal attack speed, but then Druids. For a Druid, it was actually a fast weapon. And so these different weapon categories changed their usefulness depending upon your class. And that's another thing that then, like, to me, fits in with that first core value of amplifying that class fantasy, amplifying, just how cool it feels to play a Sorceress as opposed to a Druid. Having those kind of like more simplified tooltips, so whenever you go through and maybe you look at it online, it just says fast or very fast or something along those lines. But having that option to change what class you're playing to change the attack speed of the wand, it makes sense. Even though in this particular scenario that we have here, the wand is a sorceress only item. Say if you had just a generic wand that anybody could use, wouldn't it make sense that a wand would be like a very slow weapon on a barbarian as opposed to, like a fast weapon on a sorceress? And then maybe it's just like a normal attack speed weapon on a druid. Like the druid is magically inclined, so he understands how to use it, but he's not as adept at it as a sorceress is. And so that's something that will add further diversification to the classes and make them feel better, make them want or favor certain items over others. And then the other thing that they went and changed with items is that there's innate bonuses now. So like on these two items that you see right here, for that Conjured Omen, you have the bracket. You have the weapon attack. It's a very fast attack weapon, and it has a 3% critical strike chance. So that's an innate, those are the innate values of the weapon that do not change. The wands will always have that critical strike chance, as opposed to the staff on the side, that staves will always have 6% resource generation. This is, again, it's cool. It's adding more diversification, and so that there's a reason to take certain items over another. And so you're not just going through and I want to take the weapon that has the highest attack value on it and the best stats. I might be going through and like something I talked about in the previous developer feedback video, where we had like that little tidbit of a build where you're getting a lot of critical strike chance on your lightning spells, so that way it drops crackling energy, so it refills your mana, so that way you can cast like you could just chain cast ball lightnings and constantly are re-getting your mana back and such. You might favor a staff or a wand, depending upon which one gives you the more bang for your buck. Do I need more crit chance? Or do I have enough crit chance that I really need that increased resource generation, and that will give me more throughput on it? And so it gives me a choice in between which items I want, that even if all other things are the same, they're the same attack speed, same stats, that innate bonus on one item is going to make me preference it more to my particular playstyle than the other. It's good. We've got, cool, meaningful choices. The number values and the actual stats themselves to me don't matter as much right now. Just the fact that it's something that they're going and thinking about. So we have no idea what the entire game system looks like. So it's trying to focus on those individual things. Like wands are always crit, and staves are resource generation and stuff like that. Just the fact that they're going to go through and figure those things out, to me, is what's important, and that's the direction that they're going. I think this also is going to be really cool, because one of the big complaints that people have had since the demo that we played last year was about like the Barbarian's arsenal system, where it's just, they get to equip a couple of different weapons. Having those innate weapon effects is interesting, because as we see in some of those items, that like axes have a bleed chance. Well, what happens if the way that the game system, that you don't stack the bleed, that it just overwrites one another? Well, that might mean that I've got this really awesome axe with a really sick bleed on it, but it has like a kind of a long duration. It lasts like 6 seconds or something like that. Well, what happens if I tie that axe in my arsenal system to a skill that has a 6-second cooldown? So that way I'm only using that axe every 6 seconds to maximize that bleed effect on it, while I'm using other, items, to better effect, for different skills. And so having some of those like bonuses and things like that is giving you some interplay with the arsenal system, and adding a little bit more depth to that, a little bit more depth to barbarians, which is cool because it's like one of those things that just adding those innate effects to weapons is adding more depth for a barbarian than it is the other class or the other classes. So that's more, class diversification. It's helping build the fantasy. I know I'm repeating myself a lot here, but the fact that we see that in this development blog and these little tidbits and stuff that we're seeing is reinforcing that those are actually like core tenets, core values, to the developers. But yeah, it's just anything that they're going through and adding those diversification and making so that way I'm having meaningful choices, more meaningful choices, and that's going to be the core part of it. As long as those choices are meaningful, then it's awesome. It's good. It's a step in the right direction. And of course, they do go through and they talk about. You've got a little video here showing that there's the attack speed on weapons. Whereas the faster attack speed, even though it does less damage, allows you to reposition better, and whereas the slower attack speed will go through and do more damage. I can't really think of any games that have really been able to figure out the whole one-hander versus two-hander effectively. There's generally always like a right option. Like if you look at Diablo 3 necromancers in particular, no one uses a two-hander. The two-hander always gets cubed. You're always using a one-hander and a phylactery. It's the better way that the game is designed. And for the vast majority of builds, your phylactery is a stat. It's just a stat stick. It's not giving you any cool bonuses or anything like that. Maybe you're using the one that increases your movement speed when you deal cold damage, but beyond that, not a lot of builds that actually make use of that phylactery slot. It's just there for stats, and it shows like one of those core flaws between like one-handers and two-handers is that, it's hard to balance. If they find a way, if they go through and do it, props on them. But I think it is definitely going to be something along the lines where the stats on the items is going to matter more than like the attack speed, of those items and such. If they can figure it out, good on them, but not a lot of games have ever really been able to actually solve that one. There's just usually that one, it's just one is obviously better than the other. Two-handers are just far overtuned, and so one-handers are useless, or two-handers don't offer the same stat bonuses as a one-hander, so they don't get used. We'll see if those intangibles, those legendary effects, uniques, as we'll talk about, can help solve that problem. And the last little bit is going and talking about how the actual icons on these skills or on these little tooltips are just utilizing the in-game renders of those items, which is another big thing of feedback that they did previously, where the items were a completely different image, that was done in a more artistic style to be representative of the item. And it was a complaint that those items that you're going through and equipping on your character, you don't really get the feel of them, because you're looking at like an artistic representation of it, but then if you want to see the actual item, you have to open up your character window because your character is so small or facing away from you that you can't really see it in the game. And so, adding the actual in-game assets to the item icons is kind of like a step in the direction for going through and addressing that feedback, which is, again, Blizzard just listening directly to player feedback. And finally, like another one of the big things, we're getting into item qualities. And now this is something that I have been somewhat worried about for a while, because a lot of the feedback, particularly from the Diablo 2 side of the community, has been, make all item qualities matter. And I'm glad that they go through and address it straight up, that philosophically they like the clarity of analysis afforded by clearly understood item tiers, that across all skill levels, that you shouldn't have to scrutinize every single item if it drops to see if it's an upgrade. That while blue magic items are good, rares are usually better, and then legendaries better than that. So that's good. I don't want blues to like be a part of your in-game itemization. That's just way too much. as making too many things, too many variables that you have to go through and juggle to like stop and pick up every single little piece of gear that drops and analyze it. And it's taking you out of the action, taking you out of the game, as opposed to just wanting to pick up the yellows or the legendaries, uniques, and other things that drop. So I'm glad that they're acknowledging that, but they are still going about the system the way that Diablo 2 did, so that way blues do have the ability to roll higher values. And so the little preview that we see here, you've got a staff, the blue staff that has an immobilization chance of about 17% versus the rare that's 11 and the legendary that's 9. So it's nice that they're going through and acknowledging that. So say that you're just on the cusp of hitting one of those skill node upgrade breakpoints, and I just need a blue pair of gloves that has 30 dexterity on it in order to equip that until I gain a couple more levels, or until I get a better necklace or something else that gives me the more stat points that I need to get that. And then I can swap out the blues for yellows because they only, I need 30 dex, but yellows only go to 20, so I have to use a blue. Those little niche cases, especially when it's at the beginning of that in-game grind, I'm fine with, as long as they don't actually have a place in the in-game itemization, and that I actively want to go out and find a blue item to wear in my fully decked out complete set. That is pushing the power of blue items too far, in my opinion. So I'm glad that at least philosophically it's good, better, best in terms of items. And rares will of course compensate for that by just having more affixes than blues. And the interesting change that they're going through and making is that legendaries, which before were handcrafted items that would have a set legendary affix but then roll a whole bunch of random affixes, are now basically just rares. So one of the changes they're making is that the legendary properties are actually just an affix, and that can drop on multiple items. And they have that example where you've got boots and glove. You have boots and a chest that have the same exact legendary power. Standing inside your damaging ground effects increases the damage that they deal by a certain percentage. And so that is a very interesting take. I'm at the moment I'm digging it. I'm liking it. It's adding a little bit of that customization, that they've been kind of like hinting at. Something that they talked about in many development blogs ago, where you'd have like the ability to say, pull a legendary affix off of an item to then go through and put it on an item of another slot. And so this just kind of like cuts out the middleman. So that way, if you're looking for a particular affix, you have a lot of like ground effects, you're an earthquake barbarian or something along those lines, you want that affix, and so you can have it equipped in different slots. Maybe the stacking of those bonuses might be an issue, but it is something that's cool, branches it out. It gives you a little bit more control and choice over how you gear out your character. Maybe it's not that affix is available in every slot, but it's something that can only roll on, say, like gloves, pants, or boots. And so that way I can look to fill those 3 slots with these particular legendary affixes, and then my other pieces of gear I can equip on others. Or it could just be that my character only wants 5 of these particular affixes in order to complete my build, and my other pieces of gear, it really doesn't matter. The legendary affix is actually taking up a placement of a regular rares affix. They don't have more slots than what the rares do, so that makes it so that way I don't care. I don't want a legendary. I want another chance to roll, the quinfecta or quadfecta or something like that on the item. I want attack speed. I want crit damage, main stat, whatever. It's like I want those. I don't care about the legendary affix when I'm going and equipping my shoulder pieces. I just want stats, and more stats. And so I specifically want a rare in that particular case. That's cool. That's awesome. That adds, that builds upon the system where you've got the rares and legendaries, interplaying on your character in order to, have a rounded out character. one thing that they don't really talk about in the article, but that they do kind of talk about in the article, is that they mention that, attack comes from weapons, defense comes from armor. But in the image, the rings and necklace have attack on them. If we go back and we look at a previous developer's blog, the necklaces did not have attack on them. So is this something that's changed? Is something that goes back? Me personally, I don't care. Numbers are numbers. It's the actual systems and mechanics behind them that give them value or meaning. If you take, you have to have 2 rings that have 500 attack on them and a weapon that has 1,000. If you then take the attack off of the rings, then that means that 1,000 on the weapon just doubles in value to have the same property, or the weapon now has 2,000 attack on it in order to compensate. You all get to the same goal. It's just how the numbers are laid out. So doesn't bother me. Some people seem to have very, very strong opinions about having like attack and defense on jewelry and things of that nature. Since I don't care, go ahead, remove it. No skin off of my nose. Whatever makes the community happier, and the developers can figure out the math behind it. That one at least doesn't seem like it's too difficult of a scenario to go and track down. And one of the last things they go through and talk about is uniques. So they're scrapping the mythic idea, which the mythic idea was originally going to be like a legendary item that would drop with multiple legendary affixes. But, it might be random. And so you'd have this random amalgamation of powers, but it'd be so much power concentrated in one item that you'd always want to go through and equip it when you found it. And since they're making some of that randomness just baked into the regular legendary system itself, it gave them avenue to go and have uniques. Specific handcrafted items with set affixes and bonuses that they're able to just go to town on, in terms of what the power that they're going to put on it, the imagery, the art assets for them. And it's something that just, it harkens back to, old school Diablo. It harkens back to D2, where, that high-end gear was a unique. I've got nothing against using like the terminology such as mythic, but other games use the term mythic or legendary or something like that. Diablo used the term unique, so going back to that brings it back, gives it a little bit more of a Diablo feel to it, and it's keeping the verbiage and the terminology consistent, across the franchise. It's like one of those ones. Is again, it's a little intangible that I think it's worth making that distinction for, to keep it Diablo. And then just also, man, aren't they beautiful? Like, these things are awesome. It's just like the little art, the flavor text on them and such, like just like the kill to the plague bringer. It's a very interesting effect. So instead of your poison being a dot, it's like a delayed burst spell. The ability that it has is your poisons no longer deal damage over time. Instead, 127% of the total damage is dealt to the target when the poison expires. So that way, you still have to wait out the 9 or 10 seconds or whatever it is for that poison duration to run out, but then it hits it all at once for increased damage. So it's going to change your playstyle. You no longer kind of want to like spam a poison skill to keep the dot rolling on them the entire time. You need it to end. The dot has to end. So it makes you press your buttons in a different order. Cool. And then the flavor text. They said a single scratch from the thorn of the plague rose meant certain death, but somehow it made him immune. Only him. The rest of his village wasn't so lucky. Like it gives me chills, tingles. Just that's so like dark fantasy horror aspect thing of like the person that inadvertently, it's like he comes across something, oh, I slayed the demon, or I got the treasure, I wasn't killed by the poison, comes back to town and then curses the rest of them. and so now he's the only survivor. No longer is he as lucky as he thought. That's some gothic horror right there. That's some cool stuff. Like that from a narrative point of view makes my heart flutter with joy. So I'm liking that direction. Regardless of anything else that's on these items or anything like that. I know it is, you know, it's like, obviously it's like, but 9, the items, you know, it's like the skills. Yes, I know. I'll play with the skills and 100% agree with you. Once we get to that in-game system, and we're grinding forever and ever, and that's the part that matters, not the flavor text, but I still think it should be noted, the person there at Blizzard that's going through and coming up with the flavor text and coming up with the background behind these items, that there's at least someone that goes and appreciates it, and that is cool. That's awesome. So there's like just like those little tiny things they're going through and building. I can't wait to see the story. I can't wait. You know, I'm excited about the flavor text on the items. What is the rest of the game going to look like? But you know, that's me. You know, that's one of the things that I noticed. But you know, those unique items are going to fill out the rest of the itemization system and giving you that nice, cool flair to like kind of like the end cap of your particular build. You know, it's something that obviously you want to build a hurricane build, you know, or like a lacerate build or something like that. And those particular items are going to push that to the next level. And it's something that you're going to want to go through and find. And it's something also that you can build the rest of your character around, because it's fixed affixes. I can say that, fixed affixes. It makes it easier to plan. So you know that, just like back in Diablo 2, I keep referencing it, but they did a lot of things well, that it's like, I know that this item will always roll 20 to 30 strength, so that saves me having to put 20 extra points into my strength category to equip these other items. I can just go through and get my strength and dexterity up to, you know, XYZ, so that way I can equip Trangle's wing, that then pushes my strength to the next level. That allows me to then wear, you know, Trangle's armor, and my build is set. I don't actually have to get all the way up to 110 strength. I just have to get to 85, and then my other items will take me up to the requirements that I need to fill out this last piece of item, this last skill node or whatever, in order to unlock my whole build. That's cool. It's good. It gives players something to shoot for, something to aim for. Can also is something that you can add unique properties and things like that too, because it was something that, you know, you would see in Diablo 2 every once in a while with, say, rune words, where you might actually have a piece of armor, like a chest or something, that gave you increased weapon damage. So it's not absurd the way that Diablo 3 did it, with having like a piece of armor that also increased your weapon damage or something along those lines. It's something that, you know, maybe not having it on every piece of gear, but having it, you know, reserved for a unique, that you have like a Berserker's helm or something along those lines, that does add, you know, attack value, and that's part of its unique effect. You know, it doesn't always have to be, you know, these kind of like build defining or playstyle changing fixes. It can be, these uniques can just be unique in the way that they have an affix that a normal item of that slot doesn't have. What if you can't roll life on gloves, but you have gloves that do give life? Just little things, you know, of that nature to help fill out certain you know, itemization requirements and things like that. So you know, kind of brings us there to the close. I think that this is everything that the community's been asking for, which is a testament to Blizzard actually listening to the feedback and going and working on it. It is some like things that people have been asking for a while. It shows that even though they're making a lot of iterations, that it does take time to go from idea to implementation within the game, but the game is an ever-evolving project and continues to go forward. I'm really excited, you know, with these changes that they've gone through and showed. It's making me a lot more excited about items than I had previously. You know, so definitely big thank you to Joe Shelley, who is the author of this article, for going through and sharing, you know, some of these ideas and concepts with us. And gosh, I can't wait until BlizzCon Online. I am I'm really excited for what they would have to go through and show. I really want to see all these things that we've been going and hearing about in all of these developer blogs in action. You know, I want to see some gameplay footage. I want to see the devs have a let's play where they just sit down and play like through an hour of Diablo 4, so that way we can see them gain weapons, use skill points, see how the skill trees interact and work, and some of these things actually work in implementation. Obviously, I'd prefer to go and do it myself, but with you know, the way that the world is, it just is not an option for this year. But hey, I will. Watching a stream is the next best thing, and I look forward to it. And with that, I thank you all for going through, joining me here. You know, whether it's watching the Twitch stream live, or if you're listening at home on YouTube, iTunes, Stitcher, or your podcasting platform of choice. Definitely appreciate you going through and being a listener. And you know, you can go through, catch the show usually every other Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific over at twitch.tv/BlizzPro. But you can also follow the show at Westmarch Workshop. At the WM Workshop on Twitter. You can also follow me at 9ballgamer on Twitter. And then I also stream from time to time, though, you know, work has been a lot lately, so I've not been able to do it quite as much. But keep an eye out. You know, I might be able to go and get some time away from work in order to stream here or there, you know, some Diablo or what have you, over at twitch.tv/9ball. But with that, if you have any questions, comments, feedbacks, or concern, please feel free to hit me up at westmarchworkshop@blizzpro.com. And I look forward to seeing you all in January for episode 200. I've got some things planned that I'm going and trying to work out. Nothing quite solidified just yet, but as we go and get closer to that episode, I'll let you all know. I originally intended for it to go and be on January 6th. That's still a doable date. But, you know, obviously just keep an eye on Twitter, and I will let everybody know when we're going to be going through and doing the celebration for the big ol' episode 200. Might have some giveaways or contests and things like that, but, you know, we'll see. Until then, I'll catch you all next time.